How's everybody doing? I'm hiding behind the scenes right now. We're going to get started in just a moment. Thank you for tuning in. Good to see you, Robert Tables and Frackberg. Thank you for being here. All right. Shall we get started? I think we shall. Hey there. Good to see you all. Welcome to a Snyk live session hosted by me, Brian Clark. I go by Clarkio on the internet. And I'm really excited. This is my first live Stranger Danger. We've been doing these in more webinar formats, one-off type of sessions, but very happy to see us introducing these into our live schedule on the live channel here on Snyk Live, twitch.tv/Snyk Live, and youtube.com/Snyk. So check it out. Good to see some familiar faces and friends being supportive of me here. I appreciate you both. I'm going to call you out. Robert Tables and Frackberg always showing up, showing out, and helping out with just being in chat and hanging out. I appreciate you both. So thank you for that. So, yeah, Stranger Danger. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, like, when you're taught as a kid, like strangers are dangerous or whatever, don't talk to strangers, all that fun stuff. It's kind of a play on that. But the idea is not to instill fear or anything like that and make it extra scary. These sessions like this. The idea is to raise awareness around security from a developer's perspective, right? So things that you may or may not be aware of already as a developer, and maybe you can learn more about it and dive deeper into it, and you'll discover new things today. So what can you expect in today's session in this live stream? Well, we're going to go through a presentation. It's going to be kind of a presentation format, but being that this is a live stream and that's near and dear to my heart, we're going to be very like, if casual, and it's not going to be strictly a presentation where I'm just going to be jabber the whole time, and there's no listening to questions from you all in the audience. So if you're joining us live and watching this right now, you can pop your questions into the chat room on Twitch or on YouTube at any point in time. I will be frequently looking back at it and willing to pause at any point in time. Do we save questions till the end? No. Drop them. If this is a live stream, Robert Tables, you know the drill. You pop your questions up in the chat as soon as they come to mind, and we'll pause and go down that trail, if you will, and explore that question a bit more. That's how we're gonna roll. All right. So, what are we gonna cover today, though? Who's this guy with the glasses? Green. Good to see you. Thank you for supporting me over here as well. Appreciate you. This guy is Clarkio. Yeah, that's me, Clarkio. Good morning to you as well. Have you ever saved a question for the end tables? I don't think he has, Frackberg. Good point. Which is not a bad thing, especially in a live stream. All right. So what can you expect during this whole thing? Well, we're gonna go through a bit of a presentation, just to kind of talk through some of the topics, some of the things to be aware of, and then we're gonna get into demos. Like, we're gonna put our hacker hats on, and we're gonna hack an application and see how it's vulnerable and how we can exploit that vulnerability and what's the end result of that, and then what we can do to kind of help prevent that as developers. What we can do to be on top of these things and make sure we keep our apps safe, right? And we're going to do that from, there's going to be an open source vulnerability we're going to explore. Okay. Then we're gonna check out containers, which I'm running Docker and streaming from this machine. I feel like it's gonna we may I'm a little nervous that my machine is not gonna necessarily be able to handle all this, but we'll see. We'll see. Performance-wise, right? Being able to stream, produce a stream, and run Docker and all that stuff with a bunch of containers going, but we'll see, okay? So we're gonna try and show you some things to be aware of and vulnerabilities when it comes to Docker containers, or just containers, not Docker specifically, containers and official images that are out there that are being used by us as developers that have vulnerabilities in them. And then depending on time permitting, uh, we'll dive deeper more into the container space of things, in terms of like vulnerabilities to be aware of there. That's the gist of it. Does that sound good to you all? Are you are you scared? Are you excited? You fired up? You pumped? You ready to leave already? That's the case, I'm sorry, but I don't think you're gonna wanna miss this. This is how singularities form. I maybe Fragberg, maybe. All right, so I'm going to share my screen like this. Look at this. Isn't this beautiful? Is this looking? This is yeah. This is looking good. This is looking great. Okay, so this is not what I want to show you yet, though. I want to show my presentation. We have a presentation, folks. Uh-oh, the glasses. There we go. All right, look at this. I'm inside my presentation. I haven't done this before. I said Robert Table's favorite word. I did Frackberg. All right, so this is it, folks. Stranger danger. Your Node.js attack surface just got bigger. And this is my name, Brian Clark. Yeah, me. I'm a developer advocate here at Snyk. I've been doing development for like over 10 years or so. Previously worked at Disney and Microsoft, and got quite a lot of experience, and just as a developer and with a focus on security through that time frame. So I'm excited to kind of share with you some of the things that I've learned working here at Snyk for one, and over my career. And hopefully it helps you level up your security prowess, if you will, in your own career. If you want to reach out to me after the stream, you got questions or stuff like that, my Twitter handle _ClarkIO over on Twitter there. Or you can join Discord, which we have a Discord at Snyk too. What is it? Actually, let me get a link for that. I have that ready? I don't have that ready. We'll get to that. We'll look it up on the web, on the internets. All right. So, question I want to pose to you all watching this live now, maybe watching it later. What do you feel is the future of open source software security? Do you think it's going to go in one direction where things are going to be super vulnerable all the time? Do you think that it's going to improve in terms of security? Do you think what are your thoughts? Drop them in the chat. Let me know. Robert Taylor says the attack surface just got bigger because you granted me commit rights. Well, yeah, that was the first mistake, right? That there was the first mistake, sir. All right. So essentially, having this question in the back of your mind, you don't have to answer it really. But the idea is, if you think about it, open source is growing, right? There's a lot of new libraries and packages that come out all the time, especially in the JavaScript ecosystem. And more and more, we're relying on them as developers and companies and teams to help us accelerate the process of building out applications and systems that we need for our purposes, our business, our use case, whatever it may be, right? And so as that grows, there the potential issues or things to be concerned about grow too. You probably can see where I'm going with this, right? Robert Tables has an answer for the question. The future is that there will be an ever growing cost of keeping on top of the vulnerabilities, and companies aren't ready for that reality. I think you bring up a very good point, sir. Suddenly free is no longer quite so low cost. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know it. All right. So when I think back on my career, and I was starting on a new project, and I'm gonna have to take these off, I think, because the green oh, my eyes hurt now. The green screen's messing them up. Um, woo! When I think back on the beginning of back in my day, when I was a wee little developer, and I had somebody like my leadership, my team lead or manager come up to me and says, "Hey, Brian, listen, we got you on this project. We need you to make sure you're on top of security with the project, right?" And my immediate thought when I would hear that is, I need to worry about my code, right? That's the main thing that I need to be thinking about when it comes to security for my app, right? And, looking at this here, like, here's just an example piece of code, like, you might be thinking, "All right, well, are there security issues in here?" Right? So I'd be analyzing my code. Did I introduce anything here? Let me go learn about the different security things to worry about in my own code, from, like, OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project, and so forth, right? And that was my main focus. But the reality is that is just the tip of the iceberg, as the image demonstrates here. Below the surface of that is more areas of concern that are actually even more concerning than our own code, I think, personally speaking here. So if we think about the next layer, the way we describe it is like that's your open source code that you're relying upon to run your application. And in a study that was done by Snyk, it found that 80 to 90% of your code base that's running in production, or common apps that are running in production, are relying on open source. Like, think about that for a minute. If we're so hung up, especially, or thinking back in my scenario that I shared, if I was so hung up on my own code, that's only like 10 to 20% of the the surface area that I need to be concerned about having security vulnerabilities in. That's a small, relatively speaking, that's small compared to the rest of the lines of code that I would have to be worrying about, but I wasn't even thinking about at that point in time. This was really eye-opening to me, seeing the results of this study. And then on top of that, right, 80% of the vulnerabilities that are found are not in direct dependencies when it comes to your open source dependencies. It's actually in transitive or indirect dependencies that you have. So you're not even, like, you're not describing, "Hey, I wanna rely on this." It's something that you rely on, and it relies on something that has a vulnerability. You see that whole chain going on there? So, we're gonna skip that. So when we think about this right here, again, I don't know this. Ooh, formatting got off there on this machine. You think about your code, right? It could be just a couple lines, right? This is very contrived example, but like pulling in the marked library, and then I'm setting up some options here. But the reality is the surface area is much bigger. It's this big orange, yellow, whatever color it looks like to you, circle around that. And there's all my npm packages that I'm relying upon, depending upon. Right? It's very, like, this is more visually demonstrating to you that 80 to 90%, right? Continuing on with some details from that study, new packages are creating. Going back to the question that we asked earlier, like, where do you think open source security is going? When we think about how many packages are being created over time, and again, this is only up until 2019. I'm curious to see if they do the study again, what that might result in now, up to 2022 now. But you could see that there's some relative growth going on over time, especially in npm, which, it just makes things interesting. And with that, though, right, as more code that is released and published as open source and available for people to start using, more lines of code that could be vulnerable to security issues, you see that the vulnerabilities that are discovered and disclosed increase over time as well. So it's interesting, though, to see some of the different ecosystems here, right? Like, we're specifically going to be focusing on Node and npm, but it's not to say that this same stuff that we're going to be going through and the concepts that we talk about cannot be applied to those other ecosystems and programming languages. So keep that in mind as well if you're watching this right now live or the recording. The examples are going to be specific to JavaScript, but the same stuff can be applied to other programming languages. So yeah, you can see the growth of the vulnerabilities that are discovered each year. It looks like, though, PHP, is it PHP on the bottom? No, it's Golang on the bottom. Probably because Golang is a little relatively new at that point in time. Again, I'd be interested to see where the study goes and from 2018 beyond. All right, so this is what we describe as open source supply chain security. An example of this, especially when it's more of an indirect dependency, is one that maybe you depended upon the event stream library, and it depended upon flat map stream, which had a vulnerability in it. This was something from back in 2018. You could see this timeline of events that happened regarding that, but this is that more concretely describing that indirect transitive dependency vulnerabilities that pop up. You depend upon event stream in your project. That's what you have control over, but event stream depends upon something that has a vulnerability in it. So something to help, like, just really quickly jumping into, all right, you're trying to pick out libraries that you might want to depend upon. What can you do to be proactive to try and get ahead of this and not necessarily reactive and finding of vulnerabilities after pulling it into your project. We have a tool out there. It's called Snyk Advisor, which I'll share some links and I'll demonstrate some more of it when we get into the demo section of this presentation or live stream rather. Um, it can help you in evaluating your open source libraries that you might be interested in using in your projects. So, I'm going to pause for a moment to see some chatter in the chat. Frackberg says, "Good to know I'm the least of our security problems." Yeah. Robert says, "The big orange circle. There's the rest of the owl." You bring that is yes, that meme kind of applies there, right? And then Robert Tables also said, unrelated, but if a language has a very robust standard library, fewer external packages are required compared to something like Node.js. Could be the case with Go. That brings up a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I did this presentation for another group of people earlier in the week, and somebody had asked the question of like because I think I talked about this one. It was on this slide actually here. So all right, we'll skip over I talked about Advisor. We'll show that a little bit more going into segueing perfectly into what Robert Tables brought up in chat. Somebody had asked the question looking at this chart here, and I'm in the way, so let me move over a little bit. You can see Python was in that same study again, the data that came back from it, the PyPI, which is their Python's package management tooling, like npm is to JavaScript. Um, most of the vulnerabilities were found in direct dependencies versus indirect dependencies. So the question that was posed to me that I didn't have a full answer for, but now that you bring that up, Robert Tables, that gives me uh, a better answer, I think, than what I provided. Was why do I think PyPI was found to have more direct vulnerabilities in direct dependencies versus indirect dependencies in npm? And I essentially kind of said the TLDR, the too long didn't read summarized version of my answer was what Robert Tables said. Basically, with Node and JavaScript, the idea is there isn't a standard library to fulfill certain features and functionality, and you pull in other libraries to that. And it's just the culture in this space and ecosystem is to create a package for everything, and sometimes for things that really I don't necessarily agree should be packages. For instance, in the example I went with, those of you that are familiar may remember LeftPad. Why that was a package, I still to this day don't understand. And maybe there's something I need to research more and understand why a bit better. But LeftPad was a package that my understanding is it just added some padding on the left hand side of a string. Like why do we need a package to do that? And why were so many at that point in time when the whole LeftPad debacle happened? Uh, why were so many other major libraries depending upon this LeftPad library, right? So anyway, I described that to them, and then I mentioned that in Python, I think there's more. And I didn't think of this, but in Python, there's more built into the standard library that they have there. So that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Um, Green says this. Is even and is odd, right? Yeah, those. Like you can just like what is that? It's like one line of code for in JavaScript to figure out something if it's even or odd. Anyway, so yeah, that's what happens here. So you could see based on the different uh, approaches, I think, of the various programming languages and ecosystems to the way I keep putting it is like the culture. I almost feel like it's just the way that we've as developers have kind of conditioned to approach solving problems with packages or approaching packages and fulfilling needs to not rewrite the wheel, you know? So anyway, this is very interesting too, right? That depending on the ecosystem, there might be more vulnerabilities in direct dependencies versus indirect dependencies. Something to be aware of depending on which one you're going with for your projects. This is the Snyk app. This is what Snyk can provide in terms of when alerts are found or vulnerabilities are discovered and found, you get alerted to them. It can automatically open up some PRs to bump over to the version that's the fixed version for these vulnerabilities that come out and are disclosed in your open source software. And the other thing that in particular here to call out is sometimes, and we'll get into like a specific example of this in the demo. Sometimes, being that it's open source, it can take time for vulnerabilities to be patched and merged into a major release. Well, major release, not in the version, like major version sense, but just an actual published release that you can then install through your package dependency system. So what Snyk can do sometimes in certain cases can provide the patch in a custom PR to hold you over in the meantime. All right. All right. Enough jibba jabba, right? Let's get into, let me switch back over here and let's get into the demo. So first off, let's get familiar with each other. Okay. Let's get familiar with the app. So in here, I have an intentionally vulnerable application. We call it the Node.js Goof project. It's goofy. I'm a goof. It's just perfect for me. And what does it do? Well, one, I need to start up my Docker container for this, for the Mongo database. So I'm going to say Docker run. I want it to remove it when I'm done and expose a port 2701. Ooh, 00017 colon 27017. It's so fun hand typing this stuff and use the Mongo image for now. And get that rocking and rolling. And we're good there. Okay. Now I'm going to open up a new instance. And I'm going to run npm start on this. So I love adding goof to the demo project. Yes. Yes. Robertables. You know it. All right. So what that's spinning up here, I'm going to show you what this project does, and then we'll get into some more of the details. I go to localhost 3001. Is it running? That's not the right one. This one. Yeah. It's running on 6,000. Why? Okay. Interesting. I didn't change the port. Oh, wait. There it is. Okay. This is goof to do. It's interesting, the logs, you know how I am, folks that are familiar with me. I get a little distracted sometimes. It said here 6,001. It must be, that's a different, there it is, 3,001. And I'm not using, so disregard these errors. This is not an issue with the demo. This is intentional, okay? It's intentional. I'm not using a MySQL database. I'm using the Mongo database. It has capabilities of using MySQL to demonstrate some things around there, but we're not getting into that today. By the way, actually, speaking of this, right, we're not getting into everything that this goof project can demonstrate to you, but I have some links for you so that you can go and check these out, because this is all open source. We're talking about open source. We got to show you the open source. So this is this one, Node.js goof. You can get that there at GitHub. I got the link ready and handy to drop into the chat room too. You all can capture that. Oops, not there. I meant to do it in over here. Boom. There's that one. So you can go ahead and check it out, clone the repository, run it locally, follow the instructions that are up and running locally, and you can start hacking along with me if you'd like, or afterwards, so you can check it out. Oh, a project designed explicitly to be vulnerable? Let me just clone that down into production. Yeah. And yeah, you can push it to production. I'm sure that'd be a good idea. No, just run it locally and then remove it or stop it from running completely when you're done. Or drop it in a container. I don't know. All right. So goof to do. What is this about? Wow. Okay. Well, look at that. I guess my browser saved some of my previous responses when I was doing this. But that kind of gives the demo away. The punchline is gone now. Thank you, browser. All right. So goof to do is, what you would expect. It's a to-do app. It lets you enter things to do. So today I need to brush my teeth. You might be thinking, Brian, why didn't you brush your teeth yet? Well, don't judge me, okay? Then the other thing I need to do is, I don't know, take dog on a walk. Pretty simple, straightforward. But what makes it interesting is we really wanted to provide a rich feature set to our users. We wanted to let them style things a bit better. And if they know Markdown, which our end users here are developers, so they pretty much tend to be, at least have heard of Markdown for the most part, maybe. Well, if they do, then they can start stylizing things. So like maybe, the first reminder is not enough to brush my teeth, but I'm going to emphasize this really, Brian, brush your teeth. For you all, you can't smell my stank breath because this is virtual. What's up, TypeScript Tea Time? Good to see you. Welcome in. So you can see we get some styling there that's markdown. Maybe I wanted to add some links, so I wanna, remember to go to sneak.io, and then I can click on that, and it brings me oh, you get that. Oh, no. Good thing it's a database because it all gets saved. I can delete that. I can add it the correct way instead of it thinking that it's, local sneak.io. It's you gotta go out on the web for this app. There we go. Now it's working. Here's the Sneak app. Bam, or Sneak website rather. So you can see we do links through Markdown with the square brackets, right? All right, so let's pause there. This is the project. Let's talk about how we're able to provide this functionality, this Markdown syntax capabilities to understand. I don't know why these tools. I gotta turn that off. Note to self: turn that off next time. So let's switch back over to the code. Let's see what's happening here. So let's get familiar with the project a bit. We're gonna go into not there. Where was it? App. That's what I want. All right. So part of what allows me to do this is there's a library called Marked. Now, I meant to turn this off, so disregard that little note right there to the right of it. That's the Sneak extension that is providing me inline alerts and notifications about vulnerabilities and projects I'm depending upon. So it's kind of again, I messed myself up here. This is what I get for switching to a new machine for this presentation instead of my normal machine. But it is what it is. And actually, maybe we can quickly. It might make me reload though if I do this. I think if I disable it, it's gonna make me reload VS Code. So just pretend you don't see this, okay, chat? Okay, folks watching at home? We're doing it live. We are. All right, so Marked, right? I'm using Marked. This is the library. It's an open source library on npm, available on npm, and you can get it for $3.99. Just kidding. And it's there. It lets you do markdown syntax, right? So then as a developer, I go, okay, this is great. I don't have to handwrite this code to help implement enabling markdown syntax in my app now. I can just use this library. So I set this up and then let's find out where else am I using it here? Marked, and we set it up, right? And then I, as a developer, did my due diligence. I did the good thing, the right thing. I checked and saw that Marked had some security options and configuration to enable. So let's talk about this really quick. Sanitize. So what's happening here is if you think about, we go back to the app. Whenever you have the capabilities of allowing, or you allow your users the capabilities to enter in data themselves, and then you're going to be using that data in any way in your application, you you need to review that data some way. You need to validate that data some way is up to your expectations because those of you that are seasoned developers know you can't expect folks to use your apps, your systems the way you intended it to use all the time. This is why we have this whole studies around doing unit tests to make sure you test for alternate paths instead of just the happy path all the time and so forth, right? So you can't expect folks to put whether they're doing it maliciously or not, you can't expect them to always use and interact with things the way you expect them to, right? And so because of that, you want to validate the input. Now, when it comes to security, you need to you really need to do this because somebody can try and enter in malicious data that could break your app, that could allow them to run their own code inside of you, inside the context of your application. You don't want this. This is bad. This is stranger danger 101 kind of thing, right? So the fine folks at Marked were like, okay, we need to take considerity. I was combining security and consideration. We need to take security into consideration, folks. So let's provide an option to our end users. Now, one note on this, it would be nice, and this isn't always the case. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. It would be nice if these security features in open source libraries are on by default. That's not always an easy thing to accomplish necessarily, but it's one thing to note here, right? So when you're pulling in libraries, you gotta be thinking about, okay, does it have added security configurations or features that I need to look into to enable that are not on by default? So ideally they would be on by default, but in this case it's not, right? But they do. So I looked this up, I turned it on, and I'm gonna sanitize. So you might be thinking, what does sanitize do? Essentially what it's doing is it's taking user input and it's checking it for keywords, known character sets that that can be used to be used in a way that's malicious. So in this case, we're taking Markdown and we're rendering it into HTML, and we need to take that into consideration in terms of the context that this data is being used in, and then you sanitize that user input, knowing that it's going to be used in that context, right? So in this case, we want to, remove people from being able to enter in their own scripts, that kind of thing. That's what sanitization is about. And so there's a couple different I mean, I've done a whole separate talk on user input validation and the differences between like sanitization and escaping. So, but sanitization is basically identifying those character sets that are malicious or they're the disallow list basically, and removing them completely from the data and leaving the rest of the data that is not malicious intact. Whereas escaping would be um uh why am I blanking on this? Oh my goodness, I'm doing it live. Escaping would be more about encoding it for the context that it's going to be used within, if that makes sense. So allowing that data to still be there, but knowing that you're going to be using it in this case in HTML, you can HTML encode it, and that way it doesn't get executed if it's a script. So that's what Sanitize is doing. So we got that. Enough of that little tangent. We got that enabled. We're good to go. Everything's hunky dory, right? We're secure. We're feeling that way as developers. We pulled in this library. We turned on the security feature we need. We're running it. But let's flip the script. Let's kind of take a different perspective on here, a different role. Instead of us being the developers of this app, let's pretend to be an attacker that's looking at this app and checking it out, right? If you will. Really quick in chat, I see I love the inline reporting of the vulnerabilities. That is awesome. I know it's super handy. It's a great extension to have in VS Code and in other developer tools. There's a Snyk extension available. Check it out, and it'll give you uh, some of that capabilities. All right, Green, have a good stand up. Thank you for your lurking. All right, so this is kind of again giving it away, but we're gonna, as an attacker, start toying with the capabilities of entering in links. And one thing that we could do in a link when you add a URL is you can prefix it with the JavaScript keyword. So I can be like, okay, let's do test, and then I want to do a link, and I'm gonna say JavaScript, and I want it to run the following code. I want it to open up an alert box in the browser, and I want to see if this is possible. Will this work? It didn't, and we can see that it must be doing is, again, we're in attacker mode, we're in attacker perspective here. We could see that it's probably sanitizing our input. We know that it's sanitizing the input, right? But we can deduce that. I love using that word. We can deduce that from the results here, that there's only one parentheses left over now. But let's see if we can. So now that we see that they are doing some type of sanitization in the application, let's see if we can try and circumvent that. So the next step we could do is we'll do like test again. And instead of JavaScript, I'm just going to do this one. Instead of just JavaScript, oops, instead of JavaScript colon, we can use the HTML encoded version of the colon and some of the other characters here to see if, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, to see if that will get us a little bit further and bypass the security measures that are in place here. Enter that, still nothing, still kind of not getting where we want to go. All right, well, let's see if maybe I can just enter in the script and say alert one. Will that work maybe? Script, enter. No, that just renders it out. So that it's like encoding it instead. Very interesting stuff going on here, right? All right, so then we can maybe, as an attacker, maybe we try some other input that's available that we know of, or we can maybe do some searching on, knowing that this is like a Node application. We figured that out from our reconnaissance here and start looking for Markdown libraries that are out there. And then we could see, okay, there's Markdown. There's Mark seems to be like pretty popular. This is most likely the one that's being used. We know it's being used. And then I can start looking into this and maybe look up certain security reports on this open source library in particular and find out what versions have vulnerabilities in them and start iterating over those vulnerabilities that are out there for that. But again, let's jump back over here and let's go with the one that actually works. So this is another link. We are using the JavaScript keyword to indicate that this URL is to run JavaScript inside the context of the app here. And we noticed that whenever we tried to use the HTML encoded version of the the colon character, it would still catch that. So we start figuring out, all right, maybe it's keying off of JavaScript colon, but what if we enter in some more valid JavaScript keywords that don't alter the script that we're trying to execute, but it will bypass some of the logic that's being used to sanitize this input. And so one case where we one instance that we could do that with is by adding in the this keyword, or you could do like window keyword, whatever it may be, like a valid JavaScript keyword that if they are looking for, let me show here. So let's say like the logic is like if JavaScript colon, right, equals, or it's like it's found in user input, right? Really, it should be like this. I'm sorry. User user input dot contains this, then sanitize it, right? It's kind of like what we're thinking the logic is here. And so if that's the case, if we enter in something instead of JavaScript colon, we enter in JavaScript this, that's not going to fit this condition anymore, right? So the user input equals JavaScript colon this, right? So imagine that is the case. See how it won't satisfy this if condition, and therefore the sanitization logic that might run inside of this block of code will not get executed to actually sanitize the input. So we try that out, and we do that with some of the other capabilities too. See at the end, I'm doing that for the closing parentheses as well. And we hit enter. Oh, now we got something different. It is actually a link, and when I click on it, it shows the alert box. Marked exploit successful. Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. So now, for many of you that are familiar with this, you're like, okay, that makes sense. That's not good. But some of you might be thinking, why is that not good? Like you're just showing an alert box, Brian. No big deal. Well, I mean, you could. I don't have a demonstration to go through this right now, but you could once an attacker realizes that they can execute their own code now, they can change it from being alert with a text message to, you know, get me the authentication tokens and cookies that are in the user's browser. And then I could send like, this is, and then this gets stored in the database of this application. And if I send like my to-do list to somebody else and get them to click on this, then I can have it make an XHR request to my API that will digest or ingest rather the user input and auth tokens and whatnot to my attacker API, and then I can start using that information to my advantage and do more malicious stuff, right? So I'm exfiltrating sensitive data out of the application through this, what's called cross-site scripting vulnerability. So, yes, Robert Tails, I know for a fact this is one way attackers go hunt for vulnerabilities. Oh, you're using a rich text widget. Let's go find some of those with open vulns. Exactly, yes. Console log process.env object. I don't know that we could do that here, right? Because this is running in the context of the browser, which doesn't have the process.env stuff, right? But I get what you're saying. On the node side, if you can get access to executing code there, you can start pulling out that information. Could also probably find a way to list all the other packages being used once you find a single exploit. True. And then you can try and find exploits in those packages even further. Yeah, very good point. So that, folks, was a cross-site scripting vulnerability, and we exploited it by this little payload here by getting this alert to pop up. So what do we do in this situation? How do I stay on top of this to know that my project dependencies, my open source dependencies, have vulnerabilities in them? And then how do I fix them, right? And that's where Snyk comes into play. Snyk is a great tool to help out with uh, keeping on top of these things. Snyk open source in particular, because Snyk offers several different products. The one we're talking about right now is Snyk open source. And so if I jump over here to my projects, this is that Node.js goof project I was telling you about. I can add the project via GitHub. So I just click on this to import it. I hook up my GitHub account, and then all the different repositories and organizations that have access to, I can pull in to Snyk to start monitoring my projects and alerting me to vulnerabilities and providing details on how to fix those vulnerabilities if there's patches available in my open source code, and so forth, right? So let's get without importing one. But that's how you would go about importing a project. So in particular, Snyk picks up that I'm using both a package JSON file and a Docker file. We'll get to the Docker file stuff in a moment. Let's take a look at what Snyk reports on regarding my package JSON file. So let's search for marked here. And now I'm filtering on all the vulnerabilities that Snyk has found in my open source code. Sorry about that. And only focusing on the marked vulnerabilities that were found based on the version of Mark that I'm using in my project. So this isn't the correct one off the top, but this is yet another vulnerability in this version of Mark that was disclosed and reported and Snyk is alerting me to. But the one we want to focus on in particular is this one, this cross-site scripting one. So what's great about this is if you're new to developer security, you're new to these types of things, Snyk provides a lot of educational details and resources around each vulnerability so that you can, just educate yourself, learn, skill up, and just learn more. And I'm constantly reviewing this in my own open source projects and learning about new things, new capabilities and vulnerabilities that I should be aware of and how they're leveraged by folks that are doing malicious things. So I'll click on show more details here. It shows me that it's introduced through a direct dependency. Mark 035 is the version I'm using. But fortunately, there's a fix in an updated version, this patch version 3.6. So what I could do is I can um, have Snyk open up a PR for me to fix that, and then I can check out that branch of the PR, review it, make sure everything still works as I expect it to work, and maybe run the tests against it that I might have for my project, and everything looks good, and then I can merge it, and then Snyk will then retest depending on the frequency that you want it to run. You can manually trigger a test through the top here. There's a retest button, but Snyk will retest it, and then you should see that one go away, and it counts as like a fixed vulnerability that you completed for your project, which is a great feeling. Like this, it's almost like sticking to the theme of having to-do lists. Whenever you check something off your to-do list, maybe you got like around the house to-do list that you work on. It always feels good to get those things off your plate, right? And you get that same feeling I've found whenever I fix vulnerabilities in my projects. Rabbit Tails says, my only frustration, and it's not the fault of Snyk, is when you have a list of them with no known fix. And hi, Sean, good to see you, buddy. Thank you for tuning in as well. WW Sean 08 in the chat. Yeah, in those cases, I agree. It can be pretty frustrating that there is no known fix for them, which we'll see. I've been finding a lot when it comes to using containers, and it's like, well, what do I do? Like so. But we'll talk a bit more about that as we get to it. Holy cow, we're 45 minutes into this. We're gonna go longer than an hour. Good thing we don't have any other streams on the channel. Um, what was I gonna say though? I lost my train of thought. Hmm. Hmm. Oh, I wanted to double check if we're getting any comments over on the YouTube side of things. I don't think I see any so far. Yeah, we're good. But just a quick reminder to everybody, this is, we're treating this like, oh, that banner's still up all this time though. My bad. Um, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to interrupt me. I'm constantly checking on the chat room and happy to answer them. This is not like a formal presentation where I can't stop. Having too much content to share sounds like a good problem to have. Yeah, yes, definitely helpful in that case. The quality is bad. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Sad. Wonder what's going on the YouTube side of things. We use StreamYard, so I don't know. Is it the fidelity of it? You can't see it. I can zoom in a bit more. Not to interrupt, as I'm a coworker. Oh, all right. Oh, hey Martin, good to see you. No worries. You're not interrupting. You're not interrupting. You wouldn't interrupt at all. I encourage the chat messages and questions and comments. So, uh, Sod over on YouTube. Let me know if that helps by zooming in a bit, but I don't know. It might be a bandwidth situation too. Anybody else seeing issues with the quality of the stream? Let me know in the chat, please, when you get a chance. All right, so let's go ahead and the text is not clear. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. I've zoomed in quite a bit here. We'll zoom in a little bit more. That'll help. Green says my stream has buffered a couple of times, but not too bad. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know why that would be. All right, something to note for future reference. So let's. Oh, that's where I was going to go with this. So we wanted to look into this particular issue a bit more. I really like, and I'm not just saying this, I like reading or using instead of reading all these other CVE, CWE. Let me go back. These things are not fun to read to me. Let's go back here. We'll search for marked again. I don't find it fun to read these things. Look at that. It's hurting my eyes. And I don't know that I'm getting a whole lot of, I mean, this is like a standard thing in the industry, but I don't know. I don't know about you. What do you all think? Do you like reading that or do you like reading this better? Look at this. This gives me better insight. This is more user friendly. This is more beginner friendly in my mind. A tiny bit of data, according to my research, the average JS project has 171 dependencies. Wowzers. Wowzers. Text is relatively clear, though not like it's in my own browser. Huh. Raul Oliverio. Try setting a higher resolution and not auto. Well, so we're using StreamYard to broadcast to both Twitch and YouTube channels for Snyk. So I suspect it's something with maybe StreamYard. I don't know. I'll have to look into it post stream and see. But I appreciate y'all giving that feedback. Make note of it. Rabbit Tails trying to read a CVE. I start getting a nosebleed. That's pretty drastic. All right. So in here, we read through this. It's a cross-site scripting vulnerability found in marked package, and it gives you an overview of what's going on here. Even if you have like just what we just saw, even if you have the sanitized true protection on, you can still inject the JavaScript code by bypassing with input like we saw. So then it goes into more details on like what's going on here, the different types of cross-site scripting, so you can learn more about stored, reflected, DOM-based, mutated cross-site scripting, and so forth. What environments are affected. But the part that I want to, you can all check that out. I'll drop it in the chat as well. See here. Um, you can read through some of this stuff if you want to dive in deeper. But for the sake of time, the one thing I want to point out is that this was like again, we talked about this a bit earlier during the presentation portion. This was disclosed in May of 2015, and it didn't get a published fix until April 2016. Right. And to demonstrate that a bit more, you can even see some of the references, the GitHub PR specifically to that. The individual that brought this up and provided a PR to fix it opened it back in May 2015, didn't get merged until July 2016. You know, no, I mean, this is open source, right? Like this could be somebody, the maintainer could be a sole maintainer of Marked, and they do it on the side kind of thing. Like there's various reasons why there could be such a long delay in that. So it's like like not pointing the finger or fault at anybody, but I want to point out here, or the point I'm trying to make is that many cases in open source, it could take time, quite a bit of time for these vulnerabilities to be patched. And that's where like using something like Snyk can give you a what I was talking about earlier, like a temporary PR patch that can fix it locally to your project um, in the meantime until the published version is fixed, and then you can upgrade to that. This is an example there. So this is just the nature of open source. This is what happened. It could have very well went longer than a year, depending on the maintenance and stuff. But this also brings me back to Snyk Advisor, right? So let's like look up moment here. Not moment, marked. Always default to moment. So I search for marked in Snyk Advisor, and I click on that one, and you can see like now its package health score is 100 out of 100, right? And so what this tool is doing, this website, let's pull it up a little bit bigger so people can see more easily. And I'll give a direct link in this as well. But it's evaluating projects based on popularity, maintenance, security, and community, right? And these are the things to take into consideration when you're evaluating open source software so that you can have some level of confidence knowing that you are using a reliable piece of open source software in your project, right? That's the idea here, because if we just willy-nilly, which I'm guilty of this myself, just throw in any package that fulfills a need that we have without evaluating it to an extent like this, we can run into these issues that we're talking about that come up. where maintenance is low and there's not a lot of community around it that can help with maybe running into issues and debugging and stuff like that, right? So this is fantastic tool that I learned of when joining Snyk. I wish I knew about it sooner so that when I was like especially like my day, well, I don't think it was around when I was working at Disney, but I would have loved to have had it then because the team that I was on, we were responsible for like evaluating standard libraries, if you will, in the npm Node.js and JavaScript ecosystem to share with other development teams within the company. And we were essentially evaluating it based on these criteria that you see here, and it was super manual. Like we were literally not maybe giving it a number score. Actually, I think we were. Now that I recall, we're manually evaluating these libraries based on these criteria. Like, is it well maintained? Is there a lot of documentation? Is it actively res- responding to issues? Right, that kind of thing. Right? Are there more than one maintainer on the project? That kind of stuff. So this gives you that single pane view. And on top of it, maybe this doesn't meet your needs. You can see similar packages like, Slate React. I guess that probably does the same thing, but it's like itself. In fact, let me see that. What is that? A completely customizable framework for building rich text editors. Okay, interesting. And then there's some similar packages to that don't have as good of a score, right? So you may not want to check those out. But maybe the one you went to look at and you found doesn't have a good score. You can see similar packages that might have a better score and start evaluating those. In any case, let's get into some of the criteria too. We're branching off from the typical session that I normally flow through, and we're going to dive into this now. Rabbit tables that may be morbid, but much like social media, free open source software projects will eventually lose maintainers simply due to the inevitable arrow of time. Yeah, yeah. Um, Martin, I don't know that I've ever asked you how to properly pronounce your last name. Is it McKay? McKee? Oh, I need to find the measurements for time from vulnerability reported to patch available for my work. Yeah, that sounds really. I know you love diving into the data, huh? Robert Tables, you love the dashboard. Good to see. Love to see it. We have a message that was held. I don't know why that got held. Aggression? It says aggression. So, R. Oliverio says, I had a conversation earlier this week with the team at Snyk. However, they failed to answer me. One can create a vulnerability if one can create a vulnerability on their own instead of waiting for Snyk to add it to their DB. I unfortunately don't have an answer to that question because I'm not familiar with that process and how it works at the company. But I am, yeah. I figured you meant if in there. But I mean, if you can, DM me on Twitter or whatever works best for you to reach me, and let me know like who you were chatting with, and I can maybe dig into it deeper. So yeah, sorry to hear about that. I'm sure they mean well, and it wasn't intentional, like you're being ignored or anything. Yeah, my handle is at underscore Clarkio on Twitter, or underscore Clarkio on Twitter. Uh, the E is silent. McKay. Okay. All right. Thank you, Martin, for helping me out there. All right. So diving deeper into this score. So at the top, you can see it at like a very quick glance how things are looking. But if you want to dive deeper, you just scroll down into these different sections of Snyk Advisor here, so we can see how the popularity looks, right, based on weekly downloads, um, how many projects are depending upon it, how many GitHub stars it has, how many forks, how many contributors. Really, all those kind of no, I wouldn't say one thing says that a project is popular, but like all of those having good numbers in all of those really contribute to that overall score, if you will. Then maintenance wise, you can see how often they're committing. When was the last release? 3 days ago. That's a good sign. Let me get out of the way here. Last commit was 2 days ago. How many PRs are open, how many issues are open. Then probably the more important stuff, what vulnerabilities are found and in what versions, and if they're direct vulnerabilities or indirect vulnerabilities, license risks potentially too. That's something else that Snyk can offer, or maybe there's certain licenses that you only want to be using for open source software. You can monitor and check that stuff. I still need to personally learn more about how we do that here, but something to check out if you're interested. So yeah, you get all kinds of information right here, drilled down into this page to evaluate a project. I am a huge fan. Very big fan. The other thing that you can do, like, you don't even need to go to, like, the actual repo to read the README. You could go well, I don't know why it's not rendering for this one. Usually it shows up. But typically you can read the README directly here as well. You don't have to go to the repo for it or on npm. In addition to that, something new that they've been working on, the Snyk Advisor team, is adding in examples of using the libraries in projects. Um, so something else to check out too, right? If you need a more like, because sometimes in the READMEs and the documentation um, around a library, it doesn't necessarily give a good example of how to use it in a more real world example. And so what Snyk Advisor does or attempts to do is provide code examples from projects that are, excuse me, leveraging it. All right. Enough about that. I hope you find that helpful. Check it out. Again, the link for that is snyk.io/advisor. I'm going to drop that in the chat one more time so people can click on that. If you're watching this later, here's a little banner animation. Bam. Right there. Check it. And then make sure to put that away. All right. That was quite the tangent, right? So we know we need to upgrade and fix this. So you saw the vulnerability, getting back on track to the typical regularly scheduled presentation here. We know we saw the vulnerability that's introduced through this version of marked library that we depend upon, marked 0.3.5, right? And let's go fix it. Let's fix this. Let's first of all get rid of this, undo this changes that I was making here. Bling. Goodbye. Goodbye. So you could use Snyk to do it, but for the sake of time, not have to go through the PR process to do it. I'm just going to manually say I want npm install marked, and you'll see that now. My screen, Control Shift J to make it bigger. Npm install marked at version 0.3.6. Then we're gonna let that do its thing. Go grab a cup of coffee. Everybody hydrate, drink some water, drink some coffee, and then water. Mm, high quality H2O. I'm hydrating and now I'm dehydrating. I'm just trying to live a balanced life, people. Right. So now that that's installed, I can rerun this again. Why Snyk uses goof for everything? Because I'm goofy. That's why, Oliverio. I'm a goofy guy. Let's make sure that finishes running. Oh, that's the Mongo URL. Duh. How did I miss that earlier? Live in your Thanos life and all things there must be balance. Yeah. McKay says you're not using your Snyk branded sippy bottle. I'm not, unfortunately. I have to. I think it's queued up to be washed. I have to wash it. All right. So now that we have the fix implemented, let's see what happens. Let's refresh this. So those went away. Did you see that? It was kind of quick. But you know what? I'll try entering the gotcha. So we know that this previously was working, and it allowed us to create a link that popped up an alert message. So if I enter this in again now, you could see there's a new. Here. I want to really make sure you all see this. Okay, just in case. And I'm no longer going to take the dog on the walk. Sorry, Bauer. And I'm not going to brush my teeth. Too bad. All right, so enter that in, and you can see, look, nothing, nada. It's fixed. We did it. Good job, chat. Well done. Well done. So that, folks, was open source vulnerability. We exploited it. We learned more about what the exploit was, what the vulnerability was. We upgraded to the fixed version of the library that introduced that vulnerability, and then we validated that it is indeed fixed now. Isn't that fantastic? Did you learn something? And that's just half the presentation. We're already at an hour. We were only supposed to go an hour. We're going longer. That's what you get. A little extra Clarkio on the Snyk Live channel. All right, so let's stop all that from running and start jumping into the next presentation, the next demo rather. Make that stop, and then I want to stop this from running. Please, you can do it. Let me open up Docker here. I'll manually stop it on my own. There we go. I don't know why Control C wasn't working there. All right. No more of this project. Now we're going to go into another goofy project, container breaking in Goof. So let's get acquainted with the project first. Let's say you're building an app that helps with resizing images, and in particular, you want to resize images for Twitter. Why? I don't know. Maybe you do though, right? So you create an API that allows end users to upload a photo, and then you resize that photo to the proper resolution that you need. In this case, we have this upload API route or route on our API, which then spins off a child process because we don't want to be blocking. Okay, we want to allow things to work asynchronously. So we spin off a child process and we use an underlying operating system executable that allows us to convert the image and pass in some options to it to describe how we want to resize it. We want to resize it to a particular resolution. And then when it's done, we then send back the response, the resulting image. Okay, pretty simple, straightforward. It's a Node app. It's using Express. The main like HTML page for end users to go to get to the options to hit this API endpoint is public, and that's about it. But let's talk about the container side of things, how we describe the container that we need to run this application. So those of you that are familiar with containers and Docker files are probably like, okay, this is pretty typical stuff that I've seen before. But if you are new, let's step through it a little bit so you can follow along. So at the top here, we describe, and I'm not a container expert here. So those of you that are, you can correct me where I'm wrong. Please feel free to do so in the chat. Containers you've heard of? I know you've heard of them, route tables. So this top here is describing what's the base image we want to start from in terms of describing the container that we want our app to run within, right? And describing like the system that we need in place in order for the app to run successfully in production. So here, albeit it's an old version, intentionally old because we want it to be vulnerable, and this one has, don't worry about it. Okay. So we're going with this base image, and that describes saying, hey, we need this node and we node runtime on it and this particular version of it based on this characteristics. Okay. Enough said about that. Then we do some things to set up like the directories that we need to run, so like place the application code in. We install our dependencies. We expose some ports that we're going to need, and then we just run it. Just run it. And that's it. That's what's happening here. So what we're going to do now is I need to get my Docker instructions again because I can't memorize them. We need to build this. Docker build the current folder dot, and then we're going to tag it with a tag name of RCE. While that is running, let me check on chat and see what you all are talking about. You got it exactly correct. Thank you, Robert Tables. Oliverio, containers all or how to complicate a simple infra with a lot of moving parts. Maybe. Oh, whoa. Executor failed running. Bin she npm install. That's never happened before. Did it actually finish though? Let's try again. Uh-oh. It was not able to run npm install. Why? That's not good. The demo gods are not on my side today. Why? Thanks, Docker. No, I don't think it's Docker. I don't know what's going on here. McCase is better or worse than Shadow IT. Yeah, right. You could have Shadow IT. Well, you know what? We're live. This is what we're gonna do. A live stream. We're gonna see if there's any details that can help us out in understanding why this is not working. Right. That's Angular Python. Cannot build image. Hey now, I got paid a lot to be did you Stack Overflow? Is this the Angular one though? I'm trying to build a Docker image, but it throws an error and I can't seem to figure out why. Hey, that's me. It's stuck on that. I'm not running that one though. Correct your system clock? What? Oh, that's if you're getting release is not valid yet. No, that can't be. Docker build hashtag no cache. Okay, let's try that. Why not, right? Copy paste from Stack Overflow. Nobody does that. ERCE. Let's see. Did you remember to sacrifice a device to the demo gods? No, I did not. Maybe that was it, Sean. That still didn't help. Okay. Let's keep going with it. What else we got here? What else you got for me, Stack Overflow? I'm not doing this though. I think in the base image it is doing this. Is the seg fault? Read my words. Going to fail. Try running it outside. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, let me see. I could run it in WSL. Hold on a second. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. This was working though. That's what I'm run it in Ubuntu. Ubuntu. I want to do that. Docker. The thing in here is okay. All right, see if we can go in here. It's DNS. It's always DNS. Yeah. Docker build dot -t. Node 61 Wheezy. Sounds like a rapper name. Nope, still getting the same thing, even in WSL. Windows Subsystem for Linux. To see if it works, yeah. So next up is command prompt, maybe? Oops. Let's try the command prompt. CLS. Build this. Easy is a Debian release, old one of that. Okay. Yeah, I'm intentionally using old ones for the purposes of the but even in Windows command prompt, I'm still getting this segmentation fault. Well, I think we might just have to skip this then at this point, folks, unless we can in the next few minutes figure out some more details. That could also lead to seg faults. Well, actually, I know a quick solution. I can connect from my other computer. Hold on. Easy peasy. Just bear with me a moment. We'll get back into the regularly scheduled. If you have a very recent top level dependency that has newer libs, maybe. Is there something incompatible on the package JSON of this version of npm? Did you remember? Oh, I missed that message from before. Robert Tables. Let's see. Now I'm starting to sweat here. This is what happens. Normally on a live stream, I wouldn't sweat like this. This is expected. This is a stranger danger session. Did anything change in this? No. Maybe if I restart Docker? Remove that image. Well, this is a bummer. All right, I'm going to try restarting Docker. Docker desktop I'm using. I mean, it could be TypeScript T time says the one thing Docker was supposed to fix. It works on my PC. True. Sean says, so ship your PC. That's how we got Docker. Yeah. All right. Docker has restarted now. Let me try Docker build this. No, nothing. Even after restarting Docker, I still get the error. All right, so I'm going to join from my other laptop that should work. Let's pause that there. Let's. I got to get it set up though. Man, no bueno. I literally did this. Well, I did it on this machine. yesterday, so that's why. But let me get connected here into my stream. Enter the studio. How's your Wednesday going, folks? Did your demos fail yet? All right, I want to share. Gotta clean up some stuff here. Quit that. Make this bigger. Take the long road and use strace inside the container. Yeah. All right. Now I can share. Can I share though? Let's make this full screen. Minimize that. Share. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. I want to share. Oh, it's not showing it up. Are you kidding me? Nothing's going right now. Cancel. Boy, oh boy. What a failure. Goof container. Code open up in that folder. Hey, this is more informative than any PowerPoint presentation could be. Okay, that's good to hear. We bear. Thank you, TypeScript tea time. You could add a Docker ignore file to ignore node modules and or then also delete your host machine node modules and give that a go. You know what? Let me give it. You know what? That my Docker. You know what? It is ignoring it. Look at this. Here's my Docker ignore file. And or delete your host machine node modules and give that a go. I don't have any host machine node modules either. But I like your thought. That was a good idea. Well, I'm writing GitHub actions that modify GitHub actions, so you tell me how it's going. All right, Sean. Fair enough. All right, let's see if I can share this. Share screen. Pick this VS Code window. Okay. And then I should be able to add it now to the stream. But it's really going to mess things up in terms of the layout. So we'll see. Oh, you see it. You already saw it. Look at that. Perfect. Okay, let's see if this helps. So here's the code again. Let's see if I can build it. Clear docker build dot -t RCE. If it gives me a segmentation fault on this one, oh, there we go. So it did run. Don't know why that worked now, but it did. Oh, on this machine. It works on my machine. Oh, so good. Yeah. All right. So now that built, where do we go from here, chat? We only go up. That's where we go. All right. So now that I built it, now I want to run it. Right. So now I'm going to say, hey, Docker, run this, remove it when it's done, open up the port 3112, because that's where I'm running my Node app. I want to give it the name RCE and use the RCE image. And now we're running. Now I can't share my screen with you though. Can I? Because I'm only sharing this window. The only thing worse than something not working when it should is something working when it should not. Yep. Let's open up new private window. Let's do that. And we'll go to localhost 3112 public. You probably can't see this. Man, this is really fun, isn't it? Let's open up that now. Share it. Okay. All right. Actually, I need to just share my window. I need to share the whole window. I don't want to do that though, for obvious reasons, but we're gonna have to because it's gonna be the only way to make this happen. Okay. All right. So now I should be able to switch back and forth between this. We'll make it big screen, and we'll make this one big screen. All right. All right. Now we're good to go. All right. So here's the app running. All right. We did it, chat. We made it. We had to work around some things, but we made it. All right. So here's the app. Right. I can choose a file to upload, and I want to go here, go here, go here, go here, and choose this image. And I want to resize that. Now, before I do that though, let's tap into the running container. So I'm going to run, I'm going to open up a bash terminal or yeah, executable. We're going to interactive terminal on the RCE instance and make it bash. All right, so now we're inside here. Let's see what's in the file system in that container. ls minus ltra, so we can see the size of things too, right? So I want you to take a mental note here, chat, of, let's clear this and run it again so it's nice and clean. What files are in the image or in the container, the running container right now, okay? Everybody can see that? Everybody can read that? Whoa, a little too big. How about now? Okay, so take note of what's here. Yeah, Oliverio, you can see it, good? Cool, all right. Now that that's said, when I upload this and I choose to resize it, let's see what happens and see if you can spot the difference. All right, so first of all, the result is like, hey, this was a success. Everything went well. I mean, it looks a little odd that like this is a broken image icon, but it seems like things went and we're good to go. So now if I run that same command, does anybody notice the difference? Maybe if I make it smaller, you can look. I'm going to give you a moment to see if you can spot the difference between the two. What changed? Yes, there is an RCE1 file now. It currently has no data in it, but the fact that that showed up on the file system inside the container is no bueno. No bueno, friends. So what that allows us to do now is I can inject code onto the underlying system as an attacker through this image. And you might be wondering, well, how the heck did that happen? Let's take a look. This was new to me. Like before learning this, I was like, what? This is a thing? So you might have noticed that I intentionally uploaded this image here. So let's look at the contents of what that image, the RCE1 JPEG is. I'm going to open up a new terminal to do that. We're going to cat exploits and RCE1. So you might be like, well, what are the contents of this JPEG, right? I didn't know this was a possibility. You can describe the JPEG image through this text here, right? So you say, hey, I want to push a graphics context. The view box of it is this resolution, 640 by 480. And then you can fill that that graphics view box context with a URL. That's a capability of this executable. I want to remind everybody, whoops, come on, remind everybody that what's enabling this to happen is we're using this underlying executable within the base image. So that's why I chose this specific base image here, because it has a vulnerability in it. And the vulnerability is it has this tool, convert, which is, I think, it's a subset of another tool called Image Magic that allows you to do image manipulation. And so that particular version of it does not have proper sanitization on reading this input that's supplied in the image that a user can upload. And so what happens is the attacker converts this a bit to escape out of the context of deciphering a URL and says, okay, the URL's done. And then pipe, let's run another Unix command, touch, which will create a file and we'll name it RCE1. and then it closes out the rest of it. So it's a known vulnerability in this tool that allows me to run any command that I would like. So you could see I could start pulling out even more information, like maybe look at the underlying system configuration, environment variables, all kinds of stuff, and send it over to myself as a malicious attacker looking to do some bad stuff. So that there is an example of some vulnerabilities that can happen and arise in containers, and it's all based on what what base image you might be running from, right? I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm going to. Oh, that's why I'm missing this. I think. How come I don't have that in this? Oh, you notice the difference in the Docker file on this instance of the app versus the one that I have on my other machine? Oh, I think I might be missing that. All right, so note to self to check into that later. Um, so yeah, for the sake of time, since we're well over the initial time frame here, we're not going to jump into, but maybe in a future session we'll jump into a vulnerability based on the runtime. So Node 8.5 has a vulnerability in it that I normally would demonstrate as part of a stranger danger session like this. But yeah, so this is describing a vulnerability that can arise in how you configure and the things you depend upon in your container images, right? And there's various layers that describe your images. The base image that you pull from, which can have a lot of stuff kind of baked into it in itself, and then anything you layer on top of it. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, I need to apt-get and install this dependency in my operating system so that I can do this image manipulation and conversion that I need to do for my app. And then some of the other typical stuff that you do with your project itself, your runtime code, right? But then you can also have vulnerabilities in your npm dependencies, your package dependencies for your project, and so forth. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that. I'm not going to go through fixing it. I mean, fixing it would go to a different base image version, or uh, in this case, actually specifying a fixed version of this image magic tool that we would have. Um, but I at least got a chance to show you the actual attack and exploit capabilities by pulling in this machine. So let me bear with me again just a moment to stop sharing on this machine. I'm going to remove that from there, bring me back up, and then leave from this one real quick here. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you for bearing with me through all that, folks. Let's start wrapping up. So I want to show you, to wrap up that particular exploit, I want to show you what Snyk can do when it comes to container side of things, right? So if we come back over here and we go back to my projects, and if you recall from earlier, we specifically clicked on the package JSON version of this, but we could go to the Docker file one and see what Snyk reports on in terms of vulnerabilities there. Now, this is where, again, this was really interesting to me when I started learning about what vulnerabilities can arise when it comes to using containers in our applications. And essentially, like, there are very little base images that are like ordained official images up on various registries that don't have at least some vulnerabilities in them, and don't have patches for them right now, which is wild to me. Robert Tables says, Clark, this was awesome. Don't feel bad about stuff going wrong. Everything breaks all. I appreciate that. Thank you for the support, Robert Tables. Means a lot. R. Oliverio says using an SH and running whatever you want instead of touch. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could dump environment variables, Robert Table says, to a file that could be read later. Yep. You could overwrite files with that exploit too. You can all, yeah, you got keys to the world with that type of access there. Oliverio, what'd you say before? But that happens if you have no MIME type validation. Yes. Image Magic will do it without validation and just convert based on file extension. Is not an automagic operation. I know, based on contrary to the name of that tool, Image Magic, it doesn't it doesn't magically validate things for you. McKay says, I learned a lot. I have a security background. DevOps is new to me. Okay, that's good to hear, McKay. I appreciate that. All right, so let's just take a look really quick at what, very similar to how Snyk reports on open source dependencies, it's doing similar things for container dependencies. So In this case, it's telling me that like my current image on this particular project, which is slightly different that I realize now than the one I have on my other laptop, but I'm using like Node 14.1 and I should upgrade to Node 14.17. So in a case like this, right, I think what I've learned from uh, container security side of things in my own projects is ideally I want to just aim for knocking the vulnerability total number down as much as possible when it comes to containers. The other approach we could potentially take with these things is like, for instance, in this case, I could try and aim for this base image in this project, which gets me down to 41 instead of nearly 1,000, right? Like that's a huge difference. And of those 41, you can see, right? There's 40 that are low severity, up notch a little bit, and only one that's high versus 45 critical, 174. You know what I mean? So you're greatly improving your security posture, if you will, meaning like your for those that maybe aren't familiar with that term, like just your how do I want to describe that? I use that term so much, but it's like how do I describe that without, like how vulnerable. You're less vulnerable. The good example of this is think of these as houses on your block, right? This is a common example that gets brought up in security. Think of these as houses on a block, right? Do you want this to be your house address, node 14.1.0, or this to be your address, right? And think of this as like this is the house that doesn't have a lot of security baked into it. That like they don't have locks on the door. They don't have locks on the windows. They only use screen windows or the windows are completely open. You know what I mean? Like that's what's happening at this house with these many vulnerabilities on it. And then at this address, it's only got a few things that are probably a little bit harder to take advantage of as somebody that's trying to burglarize a house or something. Not necessarily the best example, right? It's very like, well, whatever. But hopefully that helps drive it home. So that's what I'm describing when I mean by this one has a better security posture than this particular one. So that's what you want to strive for when it comes to containers. Um, I don't know, but maybe it is. It just might be more difficult to get to like zero, you know? Imagine affording a house. All right, so the apartment next door is this one, Sean, and then your apartment, you want to be this one. How about that? The drywall is falling off. There are Hulk-sized holes in the wall. Cats and dogs living together. Yeah, yeah, McKay. Exactly. Reducing the attack surface. Frackberg. It was all very interesting. Thanks for this question. I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear that, Frackberg. So yeah, so that's what Snyk does, and then it gives you specifics, right? So in this case, it's calling out image magic, just like we would call out different open source dependencies and the vulnerabilities in it. You can read more about them by clicking on the Snyk write up that's available there, or some of the standard, industry standard stuff, CVE, CWE, CVSS, which I still don't understand to this day, and I don't have a whole lot of interest in. But there you go. I think in terms of like picking container images, the idea is, and this brings me perfectly back, segue into the presentation again, is what are our takeaways from today's session? Imagine affording an apartment. All right, well, where are people living? A tent? You get the idea. The metaphor can still apply regardless. So we jumped ahead. We skipped a lot of this stuff. So there's the Docker file. You got to worry about the image, the base image having vulnerabilities in it. That study that I was talking about earlier, this also examined the various container images that are out there. But to the point I was getting at before, you kind of want to aim for as slim and as minimal of a container base image as possible, and then layer on things yourself. That's kind of the approach you should aim for from a security perspective when it comes to using containers in your apps and systems. So, like starting with Ubuntu, at least in 2019, it had 0. I don't know what the cases might be now. I gotta see what that data looks like, but you kinda follow what I'm saying here? So that's what you wanna aim for when it comes to containers. Then you gotta worry about common software that you might be introducing and layering into them, your npm install dependency vulnerabilities that might be there, and then even the runtime, right? So that like before this was talking about the base image, even though it says node, there's a whole image that has layers within itself of dependencies that are being introduced that are part of that base image. But then inside of that, the version of the runtime that might pull in that you're using for like Node in this case could have vulnerabilities in it too. That's what I normally would demo time permitting, but maybe in a future session we'll do that. All right, so we already did this. Wahoo, that was fun. What can I do about it? You know what you can do about it. Snyk can help you out and alert you to basically what you want to do is you want to be monitoring your dependencies on a frequent basis. You decide on what that might be, daily, weekly, monthly, and then based on the alerts that that monitoring provides to you, make decisions to help patch and improve your security of your apps and systems. I'm jumping ahead here. So the takeaways, right? Connect your open source repositories to be scanned in some type of frequency that fits your needs. Also do the same thing with your container images. You want to be doing that. You want to, like I was saying before, prefer minimal base images and act fast when there's a base image recommendation. Stay safe, my friends. I hope you have a good journey when it comes to cloud native application security, Node.js security, and now you know. So now you know. Snyk. So now you know. The end. All right. Did you all enjoy that? Was that fun? I know we went way over time, but this is the nature of live streams with me. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me over at _Clarkio on Twitter or Clarkio on other. I stream on Twitch too every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, so you can check me out there, doing all kinds of wacky stuff. It's quite the experience. Some folks in chat can tell you from experience as well. They can attest to that. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I hope you learned something new. Hope you had some fun. Maybe you laughed at my hiccups. That's okay. That's cool with me. Look forward to more streams on the channel here. In fact, what do we got coming up next? Let me see. Let me see. Live. I published sound yet? All right, tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time, we have Vandana, a fellow teammate, who's like she's amazing. She's got like all these accolades and awards in the security industry with OWASP, Open Web Application. She's a I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess this up. I think a director on the board for OWASP. Amazing individual, and she's going to be streaming. She's been doing this series called "A Day in the Life of a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer at various companies." And tomorrow at 11 a.m., she has one with the CISO of a food giant, Sheriff Mansour. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So if you're interested in checking that out, it'll be right here on this channel at 11 a.m. tomorrow Eastern time. That is. What else do we got? I think that does it for the rest of the streams on this channel for this week. Next week, there's going to be some more as well. Vandana and another colleague, developer Steve, they do every week a show called This Week in VulnDB, where they check out the latest vulnerabilities that Snyk reports on in their own vulnerability database and kind of analyze those and discuss those a bit further. We also do a session next week that's going to be user office hours, which those are basically like if you're interested in learning more about the Snyk products and services, the user office hours are a great way. So actually, Oliverio, that might be a great live stream to tune into for some of the questions that you've been having as well. The user office hours. So that will be next Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. There's a user office hours that's going to be exploring Snyk IAC, infrastructure as code, and Snyk container. But they'll take all kinds, even though it might be the focus of that, they'll take other questions as well. Yeah, office hours. So check them out. That's on this channel. Make sure you follow this channel. If you don't mind notifications, turn on the notifications. If you do mind notifications, be sure to turn those off after you follow them. And yeah, so be on the lookout. We're having more and more streams on here on this channel. Snyk Live on Twitch and on YouTube, youtube.com/Snyk. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope you have a good rest of your day wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one.